Hi, welcome to CineMunn Podcast. I'm your host, Vince Munn, joined tonight with Tommy Metropolis.
Always good to be back.
Got a couple of topics to go over tonight, plus a movie quote of the day, so let's just jump right on into it. On January 22nd, Bryan Singer took to Twitter and announced his casting for X-Men Apocalypse, joining our already star-studded cast of, Michael Fassbender, James McAvoy, Hugh Jackman, will be...
Sophie Turner.
Sophie Turner. If you watch Game of Thrones, she plays Sansa Stark. Alexandra Shipp, who is best known for the Lifetime film Aaliyah, the Princess of R&B, and the show House of Anubis. Rounding out this new casting will be Ty Sheridan from Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life and Mud, co-starring along with Matthew McConaughey. Each of these actors will be portraying an iconic X-Men character. Shipp will be playing Aurora Monroe, also known as Storm, taking over for Halle Berry. Turner will be playing Jean Grey, taking over for Famke Janssen. And Sheridan will be taking over Scott Summers, or Cyclops, from James Marsden. Now, X-Men Apocalypse is supposed to be set during the 80s, so the younger casting actually does make a lot of sense. They should be teenagers, late teens, early 20s, young, up-and-coming. I'm guessing this will kind of be like the formation of the original X-Men team. That's my thought on it. Since they are so young, it will be the semi-younger Xavier and Magneto, along with Jennifer Lawrence back as Mystique as well, and Hugh Jackman again as the Wolverine. Also joining that cast, if you were unaware of it, 'cause some people are, it took me a day or two, Oscar Isaac portraying the main baddie, Apocalypse. I believe they're mixing that with a bit of CG plus regular prosthetics and animatronic work to make it really just kind of pop. I'm kind of hoping that since it's a film set in the 80s, that'll kind of have a little bit of that 80s feel of a movie.
Well, they
as far as makeup and
they did
effects.
announce that. So I mean, you kind of even with Days of Future Past, like when he went back to, when he went back in the timeline? What was it, 70s?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you got like the lava lamp,
The
you
lava
got
lamp,
like
music, and
you got like the stereotypical 70s memes that you can kind of pick up even if you're not familiar
with
everything. You still get that vibe. Very colorful, hippie kind of era. So, what is your take on the casting? Because some of those movies you announced, I mean, the only one I really, really heard out of all of those, I mean, besides Game of Thrones, The Tree of Life.
Yeah.
And that looked like it was an early role for, that was Ty Sheridan,
That was Ty
right?
Sheridan, yes.
Yeah, and...
So was Mud. I remember Mud was an Oscar contender. I believe last year for McConaughey was nominated for that.
But again, what was Ty's recognition in the
film itself? I couldn't tell you. Unfortunately, it's one that I missed. So I really couldn't tell you how much of a role how much screen time and how much of a role he had. I think the big thing with this is that they are casting for franchise. They want to get younger actors who can grow into these characters, who can sign a contract for several films and stay in these roles.
Yeah.
I do like it. I do really like the casting of Turner from Game of Thrones. We have seen her grow. If you watch Game of Thrones, awesome. It's a lot of fun. Can't wait for season 5. You watch her grow from very meek and weak and quiet Sansa. You've seen her kind of grow, become a little bolder in this last season. So I'm really hoping that they kind of take that and just develop it more in X-Men, make her a little more bold or make her stronger. I think with Bryan Singer directing, he knows how to bring good character, especially for female characters, like he did with Jennifer Lawrence in Days of Future Past, and even smaller characters like Blink for Storm in there as well. I mean, he really kind of helped bring just a little bit more to them with the limited screen time they have. Now, as far as how much of a role they're going to have in this film, I don't know. I really don't think they're going to be that big or that pivotal to the plot itself. I think they're going to be more, we're setting them here now because we're going to play with these toys later type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, from our previous discussions, Apocalypse is kind of the most notorious kind of... He's the nemesis of all mutants, right? Like, he's the alpha, omega, most powerful.
Yeah, he's the end. Obviously, if your name is Apocalypse, you are Alpha, Omega, the end of what this is.
But the other thing, too, is, like, even with a young crew, it's like, what... And, again, I'm not going on the young cast. I'm kind of going as far as the story goes. It's just like, do you see kind of a young X-Men being prepared for the apocalypse. Do you think this was the right direction they went with?
I think so. I think obviously we've had a lot of good stories out of X-Men already. Some not so good, but we've had some good ones. If you look back, I can't believe it's been 15 years. They'll be celebrating the 15th anniversary for the first X-Men movie, which came out in the summer of 2000. Dear God, how time has flown by.
Yeah.
But we had a good story there. X-Men 2, X-Men United, we had another great story. First Class, while not my favorite, it's still considered a good story. Days of Future Past obviously has set the bar for X-Men. That needs to be maintained and achieved for future films, and how good it was, how good the character development, how tight it was, how the pacing was. So obviously there are some bumps in the road, like with any film franchise. But I really think that Fox, especially with having the franchise director, basically Bryan Singer, in there again behind the chair, is really maintaining the feel, the structure, and the level of success for these films.
What was, again, just humor me, what was the release year for First Class? Was it 2012?
I believe it was 2011, actually.
2011. Okay, so is that 11 years after? No.
That's 11 years after
11 years after their first film.
The original film.
So I've kind of, from what I've seen, it took Fox 11 years to get this kind of portrayal of what X-Men should be correct. Mm-hmm. So what I kind of go by on that is that, I mean, you look at Marvel films and you see that they're establishing it based off the comics. Fox, they don't have that knowledge as Marvel does. So they literally took the franchise and just kind of replayed it and did a trial and error and now they got things working. And again, I mean, they are casting big names. I mean, as we mentioned, Sophie Turner, mm-hmm. Ty Sheridan, Alexander Shipp. Mm-hmm. But just like, again, what I was going with the Apocalypse story, it's like you're going into the young X-Men and their first, or I guess you could say second after
Days of Future Past.
Well, First Class was
First Class was more about
Shaw, or
First Class was Shaw, but it was also more about the meeting of Xavier and Magneto.
Well, but I mean, as far as villain wise, you go from Shaw,
and then you go to Magneto to Apocalypse. Yeah,
Magneto Apocalypse. There, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's kind of like, what do you plan to do once you've ran those three villains? I mean, or even two villains. Well, I mean, Magneto is going to be there the whole way.
They can kind of go wherever they want with it. I mean, obviously they've restructured the timeline with film like Days of Future Past, so they can kind of go any direction they choose. They could even remake their own other films if they like. Let's say if they wanted to redo X-Men 2, if they wanted to redo it, they could. Mm-hmm. And do it in a different light. Now that you've reestablished the character of Stryker, you've reestablished Wolverine's past, you could take that same film and redo it a different way. Because the original comic for that, God Loves, Man Kills, it's not a military general, it's a militant preacher going against mutants. So they could even take it and go that direction with it. You basically get the same story from a slightly different perspective. Right. And hopefully have just as much success with it. Oh. But with X-Men, there are so many stories to go with. From if you go from the 60s to current time, you have a lot of options there.
All right. Well, again, just to go back, we originally, we're talking about the cast and kind of also just breaking into the story a little bit, how things kind of flow. Mm-hmm. And as we spoke about the three for Jean, Storm, and Scott for Cyclops, they are young actors, and if Fox is going to start doing this contracting kind of ordeal, sort of similar to Marvel, then they're going to pluck young actors and actresses and do that. I think the one, obviously, I'm familiar with is Sophie. Mm-hmm. As far as Ty and Alexandra, we'll have to see, but I wasn't really seeing much. So.
Yeah. None of them have really big or impressive resumes outside of maybe Game of Thrones and Mud. Shipp probably being the most unknown of the three new actors, but that's fine. I think getting to really establish yourself as a performer in a big franchise like this can be good. It can be hit or miss. Some people, they get one shot and they disappear, but for the most part, with comic book films, if you look at Chris Hemsworth, while he wasn't a semi-established actor, at least in his homeland, And if you saw Star Trek, you saw him in there very quickly within the first 10 minutes of the film.
Right.
But once Thor came out, then they really kind of banked on his star power from how that movie did to finally release Cabin in the Woods and Red Dawn. And while those films were not necessarily successes, it still helped.
Actually, that is also kind of another take on, out of the three, we talked about Sophie being as known for Game of Thrones. She's going to be very iconic. When people do see her, they're going to be like, Game of Thrones, if people even that's seen the trailers or whatever, they're going to see her and they're going to be like, doesn't she play? I mean, she's known for that. So, how do you think that's going to be a big impact on?
I think that will be a big impact. I think that will actually draw more audience to it. You could very well say that people who watch Game of Thrones are saying people who watch X-Men, but sometimes it's not necessarily true. I know a lot of people, at least from my own experience and work, who watch Game of Thrones who have never watched comic book movies because they don't get it, or they don't. It's not their cup of tea, or they've never read a comic book. They've actually told me, I've gone my whole life without never reading a comic book, and I go, how have you lived?
Like, what do you pick up the newspaper? Just read one comic strip. You've read a comic. I mean, Calvin Hobbes. You're talking about Garfield.
Peanuts, Garfield, For Better for Worse, Family Circus, Non Sequitur.
That's right.
The Far Side. Those are all comics.
Those are all comics, but
comic strips.
So
they're still comics.
Now they're being made into the movies for general, or I guess you could say adapted to movies for the general audience. And it is taking work for some studios. But now Fox has got their X-Men Apocalypse on the way, and let's see how that goes. So I'm very curious about the story, and the other thing too, it could be a first act. You know what I mean? Like they don't really eliminate Apocalypse, but it
could be set up for another part.
They hinder his plans or something like that, and then. I don't know, just, I'm kind of familiar with that story portrayal with, actually anime is a big one that does that, is that they'll have a main story arc, and then they'll do probably a couple episodes where, they're on to a side story or something like that. And I'm just thinking with Fox, being as the way they've pumped out so many X-Men, is that they'll do Apocalypse, probably hold on to Apocalypse and his henchmen, and probably for the next X-Men movie they might do a side story, or they might do something else, and then after maybe another movie or two, they'll go back into Apocalypse's arc as he comes back like that. Like I said earlier, he's like the nemesis that can't be taken down. So the other thing too, this kind of, as the way I'm portraying this right now, it kind of sounds like a potential setup for the Avengers sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like you got your Apocalypse as your Thanos, the Mad Titan. So I don't know. That's actually that's an interesting. That could be a possibility. That's a possibility because again, like I was saying, why would you take your most notorious evil person and then just throw him right into the first act? So I feel like someone's going to listen to this. Someone from Fox is going to listen to this. What are you doing? But now I got a new idea how we should write our script.
All right. Well, moving on. We got a couple more topics tonight. Tommy, what's the other? What's number 2 we have on our agenda for the evening?
You mentioned Star Trek earlier, so
I did mention Star Trek earlier.
Jump into that. You mentioned Simon Pegg is going to be helping write or direct.
He's going to be helping co-write Star Trek 3.
Okay.
Star Trek 3 does have a set release date, so it is a film that needs to get into production very quickly. Obviously, it's had a few hiccups. With the departure a couple months back of Roberto Orci, who was a writer on the first 2 films, was going to make his directorial feature film debut with Star Trek 3. Obviously, there was a falling out between him and Paramount for whatever reason, and he is not doing that. So I believe they have locked down a new director now. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But obviously, part of that comes writing. So having Simon Pegg step in and help co-write the film, I think, is a genius move. If you're at all familiar with Simon Pegg, which you should be, he helped write Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. My personal favorite is The World's End. I know it's not necessarily the strongest of the 3 films, but it's the one I enjoyed the most, felt the most personal to me. I think maybe even for the cast and the crew. Tommy, what are your thoughts on Simon Pegg?
Simon Pegg, definitely with his resume as far as writing, he will be, and I mean he's a fun character in he plays a fun character in the Star Trek.
Oh, he's
films.
wonderful in Star Trek.
So,
he's so fun.
I'm actually thrilled to see him writing this, because at the same time, of course, J.J. Abrams is not on there. You do have an original cast member still saying this is how it needs to resume. We've carried this formula, we've carried this set of drama, comedy, and action as far as the first two films, and he is seasoned enough to write that and get it into the script for the third. So
and make it blend. I think it blend into the feel of the films. I mean, the nice thing, the one thing I've noticed about the new Star Trek series, whether you like it or hate it, they're a lot of fun.
Oh yeah,
they're fun. I mean, obviously the cast has great chemistry. They all work. I think they work just as well as Shatner, Kelly, and Nimoy. I think they work just as well, and if not even better in some ways as far as humor. Obviously, effects help add to that, but I think Simon Pegg helping to write this, I think, is genius.
But another thing you did point out is chemistry. Being that there's a lot of big actors on screen and that they can carry that chemistry is pretty big. I've actually, amongst talking to several people about, what movies? I'm trying to think of what movies recently, I know there was a complaint for Spider-Man. Was it Tobey Maguire and the chemistry between Ghost Rider? There we go.
It's Ghost Rider between Eva Mendes and Nicolas Cage.
There wasn't really that.
You didn't feel the connection.
You didn't feel the connection
between the two actors, between the characters, the way they're portrayed.
Yeah. And it does. That does affect the audience. So to have Star Trek the cast of Star Trek to be fulfilling like that in their chemistry, it's gonna leave a mark. And I mean, the films, like you said, they're fun. They have left a mark.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen Star Trek, I would recommend. I really would probably go jump from the first film, go to the second film, and watch a third film, because honestly, they're fun enough to watch over.
Yeah, they have that rewatchability factor to me.
Yeah.
If it's on TV, I'll watch it. If I don't really have a movie I feel like watching, I'll pull out Star Trek and just leave it on. Not even just to watch it, just to hear it, because it just comes off as so fun. So.
Even the sound too. You hear it in the background, no matter what you may be doing, like cooking in the kitchen, getting a drink or something. You have that feeling of something's about to happen, and you feel kind of good about it. The music, actually, that's another thing too. With music in some movies and stuff like that, it's feel good music. You could literally, and if you're not one that has picked up soundtracks. Shut up. If you're not familiar with picking up movie soundtracks and you just listen to them on the road or even when you're reading or something, and actually that's actually a fun one too. If you're reading, you're listening to a movie soundtrack in the background.
I do that.
That's kind of fun, but it's got to be the right soundtrack. Otherwise, if you're reading The Hobbit and you're watching listening to the soundtrack, Star Trek. I do. I love film soundtracks. But again,
I actually have a playlist on my phone on my computer. That's simply it's titled Epic, and all it is movie soundtracks.
But it does spark that imagination, though. It's
Absolutely.
You're reading one book and then you're listening to the soundtrack of another movie. You're kind of your imagination's it puts a different twist on the book.
Yeah.
So, but it helps you do. If you're not probably a big reader, it probably helps the content of the pages to jump out at you more, and it might help the story for some people. That's just me, but
yeah.
So Simon Pegg, Star Trek, definitely. I'm feeling
definitely a good thing.
I'm feeling good about that.
I'm feeling good about it too. I can't wait to see it. It's exciting. So
yes.
Hopefully they deliver hopefully he delivers the same kind of work he does with Edgar Wright. I know, not to go off topic, but since we are talking Edgar Wright, a lot of people were upset about him leaving Ant-Man. Some people still are, even after that teaser trailer that came out last month. Not to sound mean, but I don't care.
Yeah.
It is what it is. While I hate that saying personally, in this situation, it is what it is.
Go ahead. It is what it is, but I still have one objection to being it is as it is, and there's one franchise where I really don't want to say it is what it is, because I know we've talked about this in the past. Just a little short blip here is Resident Evil. originally George A. Romero was doing the script for that, and it was true to the game. The story of the mansion, Chris, Jill, Stars members, Wesker, Barry, and all that. However, I don't know. Capcom just they said I recall someone saying it was that his script would take too long to turn into a film. So they went with Paul Anderson, and it's kind of like, well, and even you've mentioned to me, it's like Paul Anderson. He just pumps out his Resident Evils are cheap, but they're pumping out.
They make money. They make money.
So that's to me just it's not fan appreciation, but it's one of those things where I say it's like it is what it is. That's one of the instances where I cannot say that. And especially for me as a diehard Resident Evil fan. So, but again, if Edgar Wright was dropped from Ant-Man, I mean, again, I don't really know if Edgar Wright was potentially the right guy for Ant-Man. So that one I could say it is what it is, and. So yeah.
I mean, just always remember the cold hard truth. This is still a business. Yeah. Studios do not make movies for fans. They don't make the movies because it needs to be made, or it should be made, or because we want it to be made. They make movies to make money. This is a business.
You know what you just summed up right there? And I mean, there's probably a small percentage of people that are going to say, "Yeah, you shouldn't."
I'm sure. Actually, there's a large number.
There's a large number
that believe that these movies should be made because it speaks about this, or there's these fans and they want to see it, so they deserve it, and that's good and dandy.
So they deserve it and everything.
Yeah, and rainbows,
it's like you have your comics and you have your adaptation of original scripted material, whether it be a video game or a comic or a book or whatever, but. The other thing, what you kind of summed up there, was the reboot of Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not really, from what Fox has released and stuff like that, and what I'm kind of hearing, is that it's not made for the fans. It's Fox saying, we want to make it the way we want to make it. Even, we were previously discussing this, it was like, even Fantastic Four, when it was in, its editing process, whatever, Fox was not too happy with it. Yeah. And I'm kind of like, that's what you guys signed up for when you rebooted a franchise at the last second. So I really, it's not something I'm looking forward to, and I know we're going to have to bite the bullet here, but we'll check that out. But ultimately, that's like what you said earlier, it is what it is.
Speaking of reboots, our last topic for the night, Luke Evans, if you're familiar with the Fast and Furious franchise, played Shaw in Fast and Furious 6. If you've seen the recent Hobbit films, he played Bard the Bowman, was signed and very passionately supportive of the reboot of The Crow. The Crow, if you've ever seen the 94 film with Brandon Lee, where he tragically died, I believe directed by Alex Proyas. A very good movie, very dark, very much one of the earlier comic book to film adaptations that worked, that was successful for the most part. I mean, a lot of people liked it. It's got a lot of praise. It has a lot of following. Unfortunately, it was followed by 2 unsuccessful sequels, so hence the reboot. Luke Evans was attached to this film for quite a while and has recently announced his departure from the production. So, tell me, what are your thoughts on Evans leaving The Crow?
And again, it's like you said, it's a business. Luke Evans, he's definitely got that resume. He's like, I need to keep this going. If for him, it's like strike while the iron's hot, and maybe the Crow reboot was definitely in his eyesight there. Like he really wanted to do it, but at the same time, as the production and stuff of the Crow got complicated as far as the director left, the reboot, getting the reboot going was kind of, it got into a little bind to where it kind of held off for a little bit, and Luke was like, I have other movies. I have movies that they would appreciate me, and again, that's why sometimes these actors and actresses leave from a film. It's not because of delay or just for money, but they want to play in the movies they want to be in. They really want to be a character, and he may have want to really been Eric Draven, but just like you said, it's a business. If things
stuff happens. I mean, the unfortunate thing with actors,
yeah,
they get pulled to so many different projects because it's a contract or they want to do it. For a lot of times, they want to do it. They want to do a certain role, and unfortunately, stuff just happens where they have to drop out because of casting, because another production is starting and they're part of it, and so they're contracted in, so they have to be there at this date on this time to start this film, and it happens. I mean, that's one reason. It's just left my mind. Why Hugh Jackman is successful as he is right now, because on the filming of Mission Impossible 2, the original actor cast as Wolverine, Doug Ray Scott, production went too long, and he had to stay on Mission Impossible 2 and finish filming. So he had to drop out of X-Men back in 2000. Hugh Jackman was then brought in as second string, and it's history from there. He's a big star now, and I'm sorry, but who really remembers Doug Ray Scott? I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound mean. I like him. He's a great actor, but who remembers him?
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And the other thing, too, this one I remember because there was a very iconic actor going to play this role. Now, if you're familiar with Christopher Gans, he did Silent Hill back in 2006, and he was helmed as like a great director for making a video game adaptation that's loyal to the actual story of a video game. I mean, if you're familiar with video game movies, they're not. Sometimes, most of the time, they're not true to the content. But going back to the casting and directing and all that, Christopher Gans was going to do a movie adaptation of a Capcom series called Onimusha, and it was said that Roberto was going to be played by Heath Ledger. So, and again, for the Onimusha film that Christopher Gans wanted to do, he did have a main Japanese cast. He did have Takeshi Kineshiro, and if you're familiar with who that actor is, he's a very big Chinese-Japanese actor, and he is the model and voice of Samanosuke Akechi in the Onimusha
anime.
No, video game.
Oh, video game. I'm sorry.
But I mean, you never know. There might be an anime. He might do the voice.
There might do an anime.
So, but again, that's how kind of things crumble, and that's just how. Again, it's a business, and if not if all pieces are working, then yeah. But Luke Evans dropping from the role, and again, I would do the same thing. It's like, I mean, we all in today's society, it's like if we are offered a job that's willing to pay us on the spot, instead of a job that says, "Well, wait, let's see,
let's see
what
how you do."
Here. Yeah,
we gotta finish beta testing this, and yeah.
And the other thing too, it's like I said, strike while the iron's hot. Maybe he, he knows if he takes kind of too long, he's gonna not lose, but just kind of get a little his talent's going to depreciate, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Some people feel that, even like athletes, you don't train or whatever, you're probably not going to perform that well. So an actor, you keep acting, and even actresses, it's like you keep acting and you feel like you're ready for the next role. And I feel Luke Evans he's that guy that's like, I want to keep going at this because that's his motivation. He doesn't want to stay put as a film's wasting his time.
Yeah.
So.
And you can't. I mean, sometimes you just can't, and that's why you hear about things like production hell, things falling in and out of the green light on film, and it happens. I think eventually it will happen. I think we'll see a reboot of The Crow, finally, with whomever they pick next, or whoever's on their radar to take over the role of Eric Draven. So, as always, with our podcast, we'd like to have a movie quote of the day. Tommy has been gracious enough to pick one out of a 2001 comedy, sci-fi comedy. It's one of my favorites to watch over. In fact, we're watching it right now as we do the podcast. When we do our podcast, we've kind of made it a thing to watch a movie while we are doing our show.
We can multitask.
We're gifted like that.
Yes.
God's gift to mankind, and to you now. So you're welcome. So Tommy, whenever you're ready with our movie quote of the day. If you do know the quote, please leave it in the comments section. If you like this video, please let us know as well in that same section. So Tommy, whenever you're ready.
We're going to do this.
All right.
2 hands, okay? 2 hands! God gave you 2 goddamn hands for a reason!
And that is our movie quote of the day. Thank you for listening to the CineMunn podcast. I'm your host, Vince Munn, joined again with Tommy Metropolis.
Yes. Oh, that's fun.
If you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That'll keep you up to date on the latest videos and news that we bring to you. We will be taking a couple weeks off, as I have some personal issues going on that need to be taken care of. But we will be back right before the Oscars with San Diego's very own movie maven will be joining us here on the CineMunn podcast. So please join us. We're excited. It's our first big celebrity interview. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to ask her some questions. We're going to ask her what she thinks of the Oscars, who are her bets placed on, as well as how she got started in this business.
She's not going to have
She's an inspiration to us here on the podcast as far as getting and making our opinions known, getting out to the world, and wanting to share them with you, our listeners. So, again, we'll be back in a couple weeks with San Diego's own movie maven, Jerry Jacqueline. Thanks for listening. Again, I'm your host, Vince Munn. This has been the CineMunn podcast. We'll see you next time.
Later.